Welcome to our live webinar. I'm Pat Bombard, and I am pleased to greet you on behalf of DePaul University, the School of Public Service, and our project, Vincent on Leadership. Today, I also am very grateful and proud to welcome our guest presenter, Mary McGinnis. Mary and I are colleagues here in the School of Public Service, teaching various aspects of leadership development for our graduate students coming from not-profit and government sectors. Mary also has her own consulting business and is a certified executive coach. Just a note, we do not anticipate any technical difficulties, and if all goes well, you will automatically receive a recording of this live session. If any problems do occur, we will record the session separately and send it out to all of you at a later date. Again, it's my pleasure to welcome you, and there are just a few tips we want to offer on the next slide. And this is about getting the most out of this live webinar. There's several things to note. You should have in the menu on the screen in a gray box the word handouts. You can click on that, open it up, and you'll find a PDF of the presentation slides. So you can download that and have that available later. We're going to use some polls in this just to get some interaction with all of you, and you'll respond by clicking on your choice with your mouse when the poll shows up on the screen. You can also use the question window in the panel to offer a comment or question, and as I mentioned, there'll be a recording email to all the registrants, so you'll have another chance to review what Mary presents. We also have that on our slides. And just a final note, all attendee mics are muted, so you have to use the question panel if you want to interact with us in that way. Okay, so actually what we're going to do next is check in with all of you on the next slide to see what drew you to this webinar. So I'm going to actually open up the poll, and you'll have these three choices. You're either looking for a refresher, or the topic piqued your interest, or this is totally new to you. So again, click on the response that applies best to you. And when I see that most people have voted, I will close the poll and show the results. You just use your mouse to click on one of the circles on your screen. Okay, I'm seeing that nearly everyone has voted, so I'll close the poll and share the results. So as we can see, a number of you have studied adaptive leadership somewhat. Some of you have at least heard of it, and the majority of you, this is something new. So that's exciting to know. All right, now Mary, if you're ready, we'll hide this poll and get back to your screen.
Yeah, let's try that, Pat. Here we are. Okay, excellent. Here I am. Everybody can see the screen, Pat? Are we good?
Yep, I can see it, so I hope that means everyone else can.
Okay, excellent. Well, hello everyone. It's truly my pleasure to be again here with Pat and with you all in a webinar sponsored by Vincent on Leadership, the Hay Project. I had an opportunity to look at the list of attendees, so we've got a broad spectrum of individuals, and that's always energizing to me. So we have short time to delve into a topic that I really enjoy and have been studying for probably now the last, oh gosh, nearly 15 years. And our agenda today looks like this. Really to ask the question, why adaptive leadership? Why is this a model that we should be looking at, particularly today in the realities that we're facing in our organizations and in our society? what is it? What are some of the key terms and the definition, and then move into principles and practices associated with adaptive leadership, and then talk about this idea of being on the dance floor and on the balcony at the same time. And then I'll share with you some resources that you may want to explore beyond the webinar. You know, Pat asked the question in the poll, what drew you here? And again, the majority in the poll said, oh, I've not heard much of this, and you have an interest in it. But I thought I would share with you a little bit of my story and my interest in adaptive leadership. So around 2005, I believe, I was working in the School of Public Service and in Vincent on Leadership, the Hay Project, and I was an administrator, and I was also teaching in the undergraduate classroom. I was working with my colleague to put together the certificate, which now has evolved and has 2 phases and is being delivered online. And I was also charting my own leadership and development path, and really looking for sources and resources to help me evolve and grow as a leader. And the question that I had at that time, and the question that I continue to noodle on in my work and in my study, is how do we as educators, particularly in the field of higher education, which I have grown up in, equip our students not only with the knowledge, you know, the body of knowledge around leadership, those theories, those models, those frameworks, but with these skills and abilities that are so needed in our work and in our society today, given that we have to work within these complex systems. It doesn't take much to look around and see that the complexity that is here in our educational systems, in our penal systems in the United States, in our organizational and political systems. We're experiencing greater diversity. We know, many of us, that right now 4 generations are in the workplace. So often in my work, I hear people struggling with the differences in values that come with these different generations. The pace of change is much more intense. And so the question is, how do we not only learn about leadership, but how do we exercise leadership when we know that command and control and top-down models of leadership are part of the old paradigm? Because the power now is distributed across multiple networks in large systems. And so we know no one authority or no one leader can make progress alone. So this is a question that I continue to read about and explore. How do we exercise leadership where in our organization and communities we're modeling the way, and we're doing too in our classrooms? So I found the book, Leadership Can Be Taught by Sharon Dallas Parks, and I highly recommend this book. I found it, and it's an introduction to adaptive leadership, but it's also a case study which is looking very closely at Ronald Heifetz, one of the originators of the model, and the pedagogy that he offers in the classroom. And it's called Case in Point, and it's very interesting pedagogy. Don't have time to get into it today. But the design of the course, and I'll quote, is to enable the discovery of complex social systems and to develop the capacity to recognize effectively, analyze, and strategically intervene to mobilize constructive change. And in all of this, it's helping us to better see these interdependencies of this entire field of action that leaders have to operate within. And then it is helping us perhaps to see that not only do we have to operate in this field of action as leaders, but we have to ask ourselves, how do we intervene in productive ways? And how do we also accept, I guess, and understand that leadership is also an artistry, right? Timing is involved, listening is involved, observing is involved. I have a background in theater, and one of the things I learned in the theater is that I have to be in the theater is to be engaged in that entire field of action and to know all those stakeholders who are involved in the task of a production in that case. So I've gone on, I've become a student of this adaptive leadership model. I had the opportunity to meet Sharon Dallas Parks some years later when she was at DePaul doing some work. And then I also studied with Marty Linsky and with Ron Heifetz at the Kennedy School of Public Service. So I can't say enough about it. So I'm going to have to put myself in check here as we move along. So our agenda is just a mere toe in the water. And we'll be doing a few polls along the way to test your knowledge and gauge some of your interest. So the next slide really offers us just a view into the model. It's an emerging model. It hasn't been around a long time, just since 1922, but it draws from an interdisciplinarity. So it's looking at that relationship between a leader and systems and change and adaptation, and it's borrowing from many, many disciplines. And so Marty Linsky and Ron Heifetz have been attributed with perhaps the title of the fathers of adaptive leadership, but they work in partnership with theorists and practitioners from many, many disciplines. So why adaptive leadership? Well, I think that I shared a little bit with you why it was of interest to me. And we can look to Albert Einstein quote, which you may be familiar with. It says, we can't solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. And so given this rising complexity, given the pace of change and the structures of our social, our political, our organizational, our commercial systems, the guiding question behind adaptive leadership is what behaviors and practices in leadership must we evolve to meet these challenges that we're facing? And not only meet those challenges, but to thrive in the process. So Jeff Lawrence says that there's no such thing as a dysfunctional organization. And that, in fact, in leadership and in change, we embrace an illusion or a myth, if you will, that exists, that the organization is broken. And that's why we need the organization to change. But that truly is a fallacy because, as he goes on to say, every organization is perfectly aligned to achieve the results it currently gets. And many organizations and many leaders resist a kind of leadership that looks like adaptive leadership because to get to really influence change is really to understand that change disappoints and change creates disequilibrium, and it may even cause disillusionment of multitude of stakeholders in our systems. So here's some examples of this that I was thinking about. The auto industry, for example, in the United States is a good example to point to because we know the reality. In fact, I was a young kid in the 1970s when Jimmy Carter was our president, and he was trying to get the nation to recognize that there are not limitless amounts of coal and oil and fuel. And I was always turning off the lights in my home to do my part in the energy crisis. But we recognize that we consume more oil than any other nation, that supply is finite. We are coming to learn that carbon emissions contribute to climate change. In our society, many are very much in love with their big cars. Cars represent status to some. They represent luxury. They're convenient. There's values there that are associated with cars. There's convenience associated with it. Yet despite this understanding, the auto industry has been very slow to innovate with renewable energy. And consumers have been very slow to adapt and to adopt. So, for example, you know, we know about solar panels too, sort of in the wider world of renewable energy. So we're slow to adapt to these new technologies. And furthermore, when we look at the auto industry, there's this intense interest that of multiple stakeholders, right? There are so many people involved: government, regulation, the auto industry, consumers, the energy industry. So Linsky and Heifetz would call this issue a swamp issue. It's swampy, it's marshy, it's complex, it's difficult to get your arms around. And swamp issues are adaptive challenges because they resist a technical solution, and they're bumping up against what people hold very, very dear. You know, a comfort in the familiar and these long-held values. I also have another example I can point to. I'm aware of an organization that I've been working with over time that really wants young talent to come into the organization. And they work in the banking industry, in the financial services industry. And they want young talent to come in, to stay and grow their careers. They're very much aware that millennials have a need for autonomy. They have a need for connection. They want to be on the edge of innovation. And they are aware of these values, and they espouse these values to young recruits, to the people inside the organization, but yet they're not making progress on it. And why? Why are they not making progress? Well, there's great comfort in the tradition, in the behaviors, in the habits in that organization. Their mindset is a very logical, mechanistic mindset. Their leadership styles are very command and control. And so they have ingrained ways of doing things. And, you know, at the end of the day, the reality is that many of the senior managers feel very threatened. You know, if we bring the young talent in who are eager and hungry and innovative, what does that mean for the senior management? Are they going to get pushed out? Right now, they very much value competition. What happens if we bring in collaboration? What's that going to mean at the end of the day for me in this organization and my sustainability in it? They want it the way it is. So let's move into some definitions around adaptive leadership. So the definition, the textbook definition on the left side of your screen is the practice, the behaviors associated with mobilizing people to tackle tough challenges and to thrive and survive. There's another definition that I really like that comes out of, I believe it's out of Linsky's book, Leading Dangerously. And he says, to lead is to live dangerously. When you lead people through difficult change, you're challenging what people hold dear. It's their habits, their tools, their loyalties, the ways that they think. And in leadership, you may be offering them nothing more than a possibility. So this is the definition that we're working with in adaptive leadership. This recognition that it goes beyond a fix. We're talking about values and habits and behavior. Some key principles I would like to offer you. So as I said earlier, that this model has borrowed from evolutional biology. And when we think about evolutional biology, we think about three things. You're not seeing them on the screen, but I'll just talk to them. So what we understand about biology and evolution is that the species preserves the DNA that's essential for survival. So over time, over thousands and tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years, a species will preserve what's essential for that survival. And over time, a species may discard some DNA, or they may even rearrange that DNA when it no longer serves a purpose. So, the way that I think about this, maybe it's kind of bizarre, but I think, in the human body, in the human system, um, you know, tens of thousands of years from now, if we're still on this planet, we probably won't have a little toe in the future. We probably won't have an appendix because we will no longer need it. And so these new arrangements in the species enable that species to thrive in a very challenging and changing environment. And so the species itself is learning from the past to thrive into the future. So in adaptive leadership, some of these principles really come out of what we know out of biology, that with change in social systems and human systems, that is actually an enabler for the capacity to thrive. So when we're faced with change, we must learn how to guide ourselves through it, and not only ourselves in leadership, but to guide others through it, and to withstand a discomfort, to withstand an uncertainty. And that demands that we have this willingness to struggle with some larger questions of values, of purpose and process. These are root issues for leadership. And Linsky and Heifetz would say, well, we have to put those first, those issues first, over technical questions and problem-solving mindsets. And so we have to ask ourselves and develop new strategies to meet the change, and ask these big questions. What does thriving mean to us? What does it mean to our organization? What might it mean to our mission? And what are these difficult choices that we might have to make to sustain the mission, to sustain the organization? And organizationally, adaptation is both conservative and progressive. And we've got to preserve the knowledge and the wisdom and the practices that are anchored in those enduring values, in those competencies or capabilities and strategies that I just spoke about. But we also have to be experimental. And what I mean by that, we have to embrace that experimentation and the new learning that comes through experimentation, so we can capture those lessons. We can capture those lessons that are learned and that new knowledge, and view them as resources for the future, and ultimately for future experiments in our organizations and on our teams and with individuals. In adaptive leadership, we recognize that variation is key and that adaptation relies on diversity. And so, what we say about this is that we want to distribute the intelligence in our organizations rather than keeping it stuck at the top of an organization, for example. When we retain knowledge and expertise and intelligence at the top of an organization and we don't move it out, that diversity of perspectives and opinion and talent, then we actually reduce the odds of survival. So we want to distribute it so that we increase those odds of survival. As I said, new adaptations will displace or rearrange structures and patterns. So organizationally, our structures will change, and the patterns of behavior that we've grown accustomed to will also change along the way. And so in leadership, we've got to recognize that loss is here. Loss occurs, and there's loss in the system. There's individual loss that occurs. And in leadership, what we must also learn is to anticipate what those losses might be. Get ahead of it, anticipate what that might be, so that we have some strategies, some ways to counteract what those losses are, and assume the role of bringing people through the pain of loss. And then finally, it takes time. So adaptation takes time. And so it really requires persistence and requires appreciation for the new norms. We have to help other people to develop that persistence and that resilience and appreciation. And we have to develop these practices and processes that recognize that it takes time and reinforcement and scaffolding. And so the advice that I always say to leaders and managers is you have to stay in the game. It's a long game we're playing, and that's a game, if you will, to maybe not a very good metaphor, but to endure it, to hold sway, to stand the heat, because there's quite a bit of pressure when we adopt an adaptive leadership model and practice. So leadership occurs in the gap. And I like to think of this as learning leadership. So adaptive leadership is learning leadership because it's occurring in the gap between perhaps an espoused value and an operant value. And we can only address adaptive challenges by placing some attention on these new priorities, these beliefs, these habits, these behaviors, attitudes, if you will, loyalties that we would like to influence in our leadership. It's necessary that we provide that support and encouragement. In fact, it's incumbent on leaders to do so. And also provide the space, provide the time, provide the opportunity for people in our organizations to learn and also to make mistakes, help others to tolerate uncertainty, help people to understand what that means in times of change, to be experimental, and use adaptive strategies rather than technical responses. So let's look at that difference, because this is where the rubber meets the road in adaptive leadership. So we have to first recognize that leadership requires making a distinction between these two types of challenges, a technical challenge and an adaptive challenge. And really what this is it puts new lens on the situations that we encounter in our day-to-day. It provides us with, I'd like to say, a set of goggles by which to view and assess and understand the situations that we face and we face with others. So a technical challenge has these attributes. It's easy to identify, it's well-defined, it seems cut and dry. We have expertise that's going to be able to meet that challenge, and with that expertise and authority, we can solve an issue or problem, seize an opportunity, and people are generally receptive. So I'll share with you some examples in a moment. So we know through experience what a technical challenge is. An adaptive challenge, on the other hand, may be very difficult to identify, and it may be easy to deny. So I'll point to the financial services firm that I discussed earlier, is that it's very easy for them to deny right now some of those concerns or fears that exist under the surface. And to examine them and to look at them more closely is not something that they have routinely done. And so it's very risky to go in there and to begin to look at that and to be transparent about it. So adaptive challenges are not well defined, hard to get our arms around because they're rooted in these behaviors, these priorities. And as I said earlier, they require a change in beliefs, and relationships, and approaches to work. So we're really meeting people where they are if we're asking them to make a shift out of these habits that they hold very dear. We don't have answers because we may have never been here before. So those solutions are not known. So whereas in a technical situation, technical problem, we have the capabilities, we have the knowledge, we have the know-how. But in adaptive challenges, we don't. We've not been here before. And there's many stakeholders involved. Everybody's involved and needed to make progress. And I think this is an important point. No single entity, not one person, has an authority to impose change on others. So we have to have these experiments and these new discoveries and embrace that. And people often resist even acknowledging that adaptive challenges exist. So challenging, difficult leadership. So here's a chart that just helps us to see it a little bit more clearly. So when a challenge is technical, the problem definition seems clear, the solution seems clear, the locus of work is authority. I have the authority, I have the expertise, I can make it happen, we can get it fixed. Technical and adaptive, well, problem may appear to be clear, but it does require some learning, and it requires the work of an authority and stakeholders. And then you can see adaptive requires learning about the problem itself, understanding the problem, learning a way through to solutions and progress, and the work being done is by those who have a stake in the success, in the change. So here are some examples that I think might help. So I'll make some easy ones. So a technical challenge would look like I ride my bicycle, I fall off, I break my arm. Problem definition pretty clear. Mary's arm is broken. The solution is quite clear. She needs to go get that set in a cast, go through physical therapy. In 12 weeks, the bone would have healed, and the locus of work is the doctor. He has the authority, he has expertise. Very, very clear. A technical and adaptive problem might look like Mary goes to the doctor, and the doctor says, hey, I have some not so good news with you. You've been diagnosed with diabetes. Technically, we're clear on what needs to happen in terms of diagnosis of the diabetes and a prescription of insulin. Technical response is the insulin. However, an adaptive response must happen here too. So it requires the authority of the doctor, the medical expert, and the stakeholder, who is Mary, to change some habits, behaviors, diet, exercise, nutrition. And it also might require the family system to be helpful to the diagnosis. So the family system also are stakeholders in this. Care providers who are helping Mary in this adjustment and these new behaviors are considered stakeholders. So it requires the authority and this multitude of stakeholders. An adapted challenge, if we're going to stick with this medical examples, is the diabetes epidemic. So we understand and we know right now that diabetes in the United States is growing so significantly that it has become epidemic in its proportion. And we know it takes a toll, not only on the individual, but it's taking a toll on our healthcare systems, the emotional health of people and their families. It's taking a financial toll in the medical system, in the insurance system. It's really impacting our country. And one thing we also know about it is that it kills more Americans every year than AIDS and breast cancer combined. So this is an adaptive challenge. It requires learning about the challenge. It requires a solution, learning our way to it. We can eradicate this. And the locus of work is among many, many, many stakeholders. So let's diagnose them, and Pat's going to help us with a poll here. So I'll come to the next slide. So we're going to look at some of these. I've got 5 of them, and Pat's going to bring a poll on. And so we'll ask you to choose A, B, or C, and then I'll share with you the answer, the most excellent answer to help you see why it's one, the other, or both.
Okay, Mary, I'm launching the first poll.
Okay, thanks, Pat. So the first one is take medication to lower blood pressure. Adaptive, technical, or technical and adaptive.
Again, you want to click on the white circle on your screen. Okay, I'm going to close the poll. The majority of people have voted. Oh, we still have some people coming in. I'll wait another 5 seconds. Okay, I'm going to close the poll and show the results.
Oh, okay. So 7% say adaptive, 40% say technical. C says technical and adaptive. Well, what I would say is the correct answer is actually B. It's technical. The problem definition is very clear. It's high blood pressure. The solution is very clear. Take the medication or have a healthy lifestyle to reduce it. And the locus of work is the doctor or the medical expert. So to be fair, perhaps as someone is being diagnosed with high blood pressure and they have to get on with these new changes, it can become a technical and adaptive problem. But I would say, for the most part, technical. We know the problem. We know the best response. Okay, shall we move to number 2, Pat?
Okay. And this is about...
This one's about nurses and pharmacists. Yes. So this one is encouraging nurses and pharmacists to question and even challenge illegible or dangerous prescriptions that are being made by physicians. So having the nurse and the pharmacist question or challenge even what they might deem to be illegible, or dangerous prescriptions by physicians. Is that adaptive, technical, or technical and adaptive?
Okay, I'll give you 2 more seconds to make your choice. Okay, we're up to the majority of people voting now, so I'll close the poll and share it.
Yeah, very good. Well, we've got my answer would be adaptive. I would see this as an adaptive problem because the definition is not so clear. We've got to really get to the root of what's going on here. What is the problem? There may be many problems within that problem, and then the solutions do require learning on the part of the nurses and the part of the pharmacists and the part of a multitude of stakeholders, the trainers who would be helping, the organizations who would be pursuing this. So I would go with adaptive in this one. All right, let's go to the next one, Pat.
Okay, Mary, it's one on rearranging organizational structure.
Yep, so this one is rearrange organizational structure and staffing to better align to new mission statement and strategic plan. Rearrange organizational structure and staffing to better align to new mission and strategic plan.
Okay, I think the majority of people have finished voting.
Okay.
And I'll share the results.
So C, ding, ding, ding. All right, so this answer is C, technical and adaptive. So HR in organizations may have this competency when it comes to organizational structures, and however, managers may need to learn. They have to assess perhaps differently. They may have to learn how to do that well. People are, of course, going to be involved here, and they will be experiencing some loss. And that loss typically comes in productivity, in morale happens in our organization. So it requires authority where there's competence and expertise, and multitude of stakeholders to move through that challenge. Okay, should we do, let's do a couple more. This next one, I'll wait for Pat to bring it up. This one is implement a training program to ensure compliance with new policies and procedures. Implement a training program to ensure compliance with new policies and procedures.
Okay, just a few more seconds.
Okay.
I want to give everybody a chance. Takes a little discerning.
use your chart.
Okay, share the results. Okay.
Oh, now interesting. So we've got 50% say technical and 43% say technical and adaptive, and 7% says adaptive. So in this case, I would say this is a technical and adaptive leadership challenge. Because the technical aspects of this are that compliance requires setting new policies, some new processes. There may be systems, there may be controls put in place. There's these technical supports and processes that get put in place. Yet, I work a lot with people who are in not university, but in audit, who are in risk management, who are in compliance, regulation in industries and in organizations. And the adaptive challenge is to get people to actually behave in the new ways, right? I don't know if anybody's ever experienced a shift or a change in how you submit an expense report, right? So that's a good example of an adaptive and technical change where new policies and procedures are put in place, but people who have been used to not having to submit receipts, not having to account for, have to move through an adaptive challenge. To get the whole organization on that would be an adaptive challenge. All right, we'll do one last one.
Okay, here's your poll.
Okay, so last one. Raise public awareness of dangers and effects of texting while driving, targeting teenagers in particular. Raise public awareness of dangers and effects of texting while driving, targeting teenagers in particular.
Okay, I think we have the majority of people. Go ahead and close the poll and share the results.
That is adaptive. That is an adaptive challenge using our definition and our diagnostic. So multiple stakeholders, the locus of that work involves many, and there's no one authority who can actually effectuate this. So no one authority can make this happen. I think that's the operative piece here. And it requires learning about that problem, investigation into that problem, inquiry into it, testing new responses, ideas, interventions, and that requires learning too. What's working, what's not working. So we would call that one an adaptive problem. So here's what I would like to say about this, is that it's never cut and dry. So as you look at these scenarios, these are, hypotheticals for purposes of this conversation. And then it's never cut and dry. And then in leadership, we have to make these observations within their own context. What's going on in the context of our organization, of the domains in which we operate. And so they may be more adaptive depending on the situation. They may be more technical and adaptive. So It depends. Part of what informs my leadership and understanding of it is context, and the leader's ability to really diagnose and understand what's going on here and what might we do to make progress. I'm going to move on and just share with you another observation about adaptive leadership that I think is extremely important. We have to understand that exercising adaptive leadership goes way beyond just doing a job. And Linsky and Heifetz make this point very, very strongly. In fact, Linsky's a political scientist, and so he looks at issues of power and authority. And so just briefly, in leadership, oftentimes we have authority that is authorized, right? So we're authorized with an authority through a rank or a status. It's understood that we have authority because we have the education, we have the experience, we have the expertise. An informal authority, particularly when we're authorized to have a role or a position, a role, a status of leader, it's very contractual. So we're contracted to do a job. It's transactional. The boss has an expectation. I meet that expectation. So it looks very much like, you do for me, I do for you. Informal authority is the authority that anyone earns because followers confer that authority on others. And so in leadership, we talk about leaders having an informal authority because they have earned the trust of others. They're viewed as being credible. They have respect or admiration. They have moral authority. So you don't have to have a position of a formal position, a status or a rank or a title to actually exercise an informal authority, because the follower is bestowing that on you. But here's the recognition that these two alone, informal and formal authority, is not going to mobilize others in and of itself to address tough challenges. So leaders, particularly dealing with these thorny, wicked problems that we experience in society, poverty, homelessness, diabetes, hunger, many of these societal problems require that leaders are going to go beyond what we call this line of authority. And when they go beyond the line, there's risk involved because they begin to disappoint others. They may disappoint the boss, for example, and go outside this chain of command or these perhaps even unwritten expectations. They challenge a status quo. They point out contradictions, and it's extremely risky. So think about it. If you go beyond that line, you may risk, as a politician, losing a vote. You may scare people in your organization. You may scare them so much that they may want to get rid of you. So it's risky to go beyond that line because you're challenging people in, again, those habits, those values, those behaviors, those attitudes. And it feels dangerous. And so that danger is that you're really out there on this edge of authority, dancing, because you may have never been here before, but you see and recognize that that's what's needed to really actually effectuate a change. So Linsky and Heifetz, in one of their articles or books, talk about an example where a cardiac surgeon might go beyond his authority or her authority and might say, okay, sure, I can replace the valve in your heart. I have that technical competence and ability to do it, but I'm only going to do it if you quit smoking, you follow a plan for exercise and diet, and by the way, I'm going to ask you to put 50% of your money into an escrow to ensure that you're compliant in this, right? People are going people are probably going to say, hey, wait a minute, that's not what I signed up for. But that particular surgeon in this scenario is saying, well, I think that this is what's needed in order for you actually to show and demonstrate progress, to get healthy in this situation. So in all leadership, leaders are responsible for these three key tasks, you know, to provide direction, to provide protection. People are looking to leaders to protect them from that the risk or the fear of that uncertainty, or from threats that actually exist in an environment, and to provide order. So these are probably three key tasks of leaders. And so you can see here on this slide these distinctions between the strategies that a leader might take in a technical problem versus an adaptive challenge. I'll just let you take that in for 1 second, and then I'll move us on. So it's a real shift that's required, particularly, and it's really about looking at what is going on here in terms of challenge, and how might we frame those challenges so we might learn something and identify those key questions and move into a disequilibrium and explore and learn through it.
Mary, if I might say something going back to that slide just for a second.
Yeah.
You know, many people need help with conflict, and I find it very interesting that in the adaptive mode, the leader is supposed to let the conflict emerge, because the conflict is going to teach you something.
Well, yes, and I say something about that in a moment, Pat. So I'm glad you pointed it out. Right, that in leadership we have to manage ourselves as well too. Right, so we have to ask ourselves questions around our ability and our competence to stand in conflict, to produce healthy conflict, to facilitate others through a healthy conflict, a healthy disagreement, to really capture those diversity of perspectives and point of view, right? And the contention here is that we want to orchestrate that, because if we do that, if we allow the diversity of opinion and perspective and expertise to come forward, that we may gather a new insight, something new may emerge. Whereas if we stay on if we continue to involve ourselves in a debate where there's, you know, a right or a wrong, two poles, and you know much about this because you do work in a polarity management, right? That, you know, if we stay on the two poles, holding fast to opinion or perspective or point of view, then the question is, what are we learning? Are we really facilitating a space or a container for learning? So thanks for pointing that out. So let me just share with you in the time that we have some practices and a couple other concepts, and then we'll end. I think we have another poll at the end today. So you know, I bring these down to 5 key practices that we have to embrace again and recognize in order to move ourselves and others through a dynamic that looks like, you know, equilibrium, disequilibrium, and then equilibrium. And then in change management or in change and transition, we're always talking about, you know, it's happening all the time, depending on the projects or the organizational changes or the environment. It's happening all the time. So we have to move ourselves through that and live into it, live into a disequilibrium, and recognize that that may be the new reality is constant change and discomfort, and be present to it, and be in solidarity with people around it. So overall, managing yourself, helping others to tolerate discomfort, and help them to manage these distressful levels of discomfort. And so I'll just walk through this in terms of some points to make. Number one, we always have to identify the challenge, and we use the diagnostic tool that I shared with you. Is it technical or is it adaptive? Is it both? Am I sure? Am I unclear? How will I know, right? So introspection, inquiry into the issue. Secondly, what adaptive leaders do is they really focus attention. And so here the quote says, manage the conditions that enable people involved to figure it out and undertake solutions that require changes in their own ways of working. So what is important here to recognize that social learning is a strategy rather than creating a solution and imposing on others. And getting those stakeholders, get that multitude of stakeholders involved in examining the issue, involved in examining the problem and digging under it so that you can secure those commitments and ownership towards it. And invite naysayers in. Invite people in who have a variety of views on the issue. And ultimately model the behavior that one would expect from others. So if learning is key and critical here, then we ourselves have to be learners, and we have to show and demonstrate through our behavior that this is how we do it. Generate and maintain an atmosphere of productive distress. So in adaptive leadership, we call this the productive zone of disequilibrium. Any educators here who are with us today will know and understand how important this is to learning, that there are productive zones in learning where we recognize that people are moving through a frustration, they're impatient with themselves, but out of that new learning and new knowledge come about. So simply said, we want to maintain this productive zone where the discomfort of dealing with the problem is the same or more than not dealing with the problem. So how can we create these environments where we're moving people through a disequilibrium and managing a distress, managing that well? It requires many things of us: patience, persistence, flexibility, really being open to multitude of outcomes. In creativity, we always say there's you know, 2 right answers, there's 3 right answers, there's 4 right answers. So how can we tolerate mistakes, create that environment for failure, reward learning, encourage and support people, and motivate the change that we're after? Frame complex issues. So we have to consider the timing, and that, again, it takes time. So how can we ripen an issue and consider that people need time to chew on it, to understand what's going on, to offer an opinion or a point of view around it. You know, I'm watching the Obama Library here in the being planned and eventually built here in the city of Chicago on the South Side. And so there's a lot of interest in the community about this new library and the part it will play in the community and providing jobs and being a cultural center. And so I'm watching how the library is communicating and their plans and bringing people in and creating the space and time to have discussion and dialogue. And do that in ways that people understand. Get out there. I say get out of your seat. Manage by walking around, and be out there and be a learner and a discoverer yourself. Here's the conflict piece, Pat. You know, I love this quote by Joshua Reichert, who's from the Pew Charitable Trust, who actually had a strong hand in funding and resourcing some educational reform in Pennsylvania. He says, if you ride the ridges, you get shot at more often than if you stay in the valleys. So if you are out on that edge of your competence, out on that edge of leadership where you're challenging people, you're going to get shot at more often than if you stay in the valleys. So it's incumbent that we're orchestrating conflict. We know how to do this well. We hold sway, we take the heat, and we stand in spaces and places and create them where we embrace a tension, embrace the tension, and have ways to facilitate ourselves and people through it. I think this is extremely important. Conflict's part of the journey. Conflict is so part of the journey of change. So skilling ourselves up, learning new competencies for how to do that well is important. Get off the dance floor and onto the balcony. So this is a big concept. People who study adaptive leadership will say this all the time. So there's more to be read and learned about this, but ultimately the idea here is that you want to be in the field of action, certainly to be getting things done, doing, making progress, results. That's what leaders do. But also we have to get up on that balcony and look down and see those patterns and events that are occurring around us and make it as objective as possible. You know, one strategy here is not only for yourself to get up on that balcony, but ask other people to come in and look around with you, and then interpret using multiple hypotheses. What's going on here? What are those values? Where are the loyalties? How are people interpreting this challenge? And then finally, design interventions that are based on that. So we have to, it's sequential. One has to precede the other. And become an artist in the way that you're designing an intervention and then testing it out and getting feedback. Put the feedback loops in. What are people saying? How is it working? And then asking that important question, what do I have? What capabilities do I have? What do I need to learn? Enlist others. The social learning is critical and key. And finally, experimental mindset is key. All these things are key. Adaptation occurs through experimentation, as we talked about. In leadership, we must be able to improvise and lead, and that leads to these lessons. It's new knowledge, these are new resources. And how do we then, as leaders, create the environments and the spaces where we can risk and make mistakes that yield this new knowledge? So to end today, I'm just sharing with you some resources, some of which come out of the literature and others which are practices that might be helpful to you. So I'll let Pat take us to the poll. I know we're about a minute over, but if you can stick around for the poll, that would be great. And there we go.
Okay, I'm going to launch this final poll just to get a sense, give each of you a chance to reflect on what your major takeaway is from today. And then we'd also, if you have a moment, like you to stay on and put in the question panel, what else you might learn from, or what else you might need to in future webinars. So if you could give us a chance to indicate here what was most useful or what your major takeaway is for this webinar. And I'll just leave that up for a few more seconds. And then if you've already voted, if you'll just be thinking about, given today's topic and what you've learned from Mary so far, what more would you like to learn? And put that in the question panel, because that will all be recorded as part of the database that we get, that Mary and I receive from this. So we'll have our total, anything that you put in there we'll have a copy of. So, okay, I'm going to close the poll and share the results. And this is what as we know from the beginning, we had a number of people who were new to this topic. So 40% of you are indicating you understand it a lot better, and 53% of you are choosing D, all of the above.
Yeah, and I appreciate the low response to B, because you know, in this model, leading is behaving, right? And so we can have these strategies or these frameworks, but at the end of the day, we have to put ourselves out there and you know, test and try new practices. So getting off the dance floor, getting up into the balcony, riding that surfboard is a leadership skill. It's a discipline and practice.
Yeah. Okay, Mary, I'm going to close this, and if you could throw up that last slide for comments.
Yeah.
I think it's there. Yep.
That's it.
So just as we close off, if you could indicate which topics, tools, or practices you'd like to learn more about, and put that in the question window, and Mary and I will look that over and as we do our own future planning. But I want to thank you, Mary, for your time and your expertise and your work on this presentation today. I can, as you were talking, I could think of a few instances in which I could apply this and think a lot more about this. So it's really I think a great gift that you've shared with us today. So thanks for being with us, and I want to thank all of you who joined us today for this live webinar. And again, look for the emails that will come out for about the recording if you have an interest in that. We have some people responding to the question as well. So thanks so much, and we'll look forward to a future webinar. Our next webinar is I'm going to be presenting on October 3rd. It'll be an evening one from 7 to 8 p.m. and we've changed that time so that our friends in Australia will be able to, that will be the following morning for them. So they'll be starting their work days. So that's the reason why we're doing it from 7 to 8. But again, if you're interested in signing up for that one, which will be on healthy teams, you can, if you're not available from the 7 to 8 time, you can always get the recording. But you need to register in order to be able to get that. So once again, thanks everybody for joining us, and thank you, Mary. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, Pat. Take care, everyone.